The day began with laughter, the kind that comes from the simple joy of being with loved ones. Jake's family had decided to take a scenic drive through the countryside, a rare escape from their busy lives. Jake, only 10 years old, was seated in the back, his eyes glued to the blur of trees passing by, lost in his own world of imagination. Little did he know, that world was about to be shattered. As they rounded a sharp corner, the car suddenly skidded on a patch of wet leaves. The next few seconds felt like a lifetime. Metal screeched as the car slammed into a tree, flipping over and landing on its roof. Jake's head throbbed as he dangled upside down, the seatbelt cutting into his shoulder. The smell of gasoline and the sight of smoke seeping into the car filled him with dread. He screamed for his parents, but they were unconscious, slumped in their seats. Panic took hold as Jake struggled to free himself. The flames were creeping closer, licking at the edges of the car. His small hands fumbled with the seatbelt, his breaths coming in short, frantic gasps. Just when he thought it was all over, a shadowy figure appeared outside the shattered window, a woman, her face obscured by the smoke, but her determination unmistakable. She smashed the window with a piece of debris and, without hesitation, crawled inside the burning car. Jake felt her strong hands on him, unbuckling the seatbelt and pulling him free. The world outside the car was a blur of orange and black, the roar of the flames deafening. The woman moved with purpose, dragging Jake away from the wreckage just as it erupted into a ball of fire. He turned to look at her, to thank her, but she was already gone, disappearing into the chaos as quickly as she had arrived. That moment, that mystery, would haunt Jake for years to come. The nightmares began soon after the accident, visions of fire, smoke, and a faceless woman who appeared and vanished like a ghost. As Jake grew older, the memory of that day became a constant companion, lurking in the back of his mind, never fully fading. His parents had survived, but they rarely spoke of the incident, perhaps to protect Jake from the trauma, or perhaps because they, too, couldn't explain the woman's sudden appearance and disappearance. Jake, however, couldn't let it go. The woman had saved his life, but who was she? And why had she left without a word? These questions gnawed at him, especially during the quiet moments when the world seemed to slow down. He would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events in his mind, trying to piece together the fragments of his memory. As the years passed, Jake's need for answers grew stronger. It wasn't just curiosity, it was a deep, unshakable need to understand. He felt that finding her was the only way to truly move on, to close the chapter on that terrifying day. He made a vow to himself that he would find her, no matter how long it took or how difficult the search might be. Little did he know, this journey would not only reveal the truth about her but also lead him to discover more about himself. Jake's search began on his 16th birthday. He had spent years imagining this day, preparing for the journey he was about to undertake. He started with the police reports from the day of the accident, poring over them with the determination of someone desperate for answers. But the reports were frustratingly vague, offering little more than what he already knew, that an unidentified woman had rescued him and disappeared without a trace. Undeterred, Jake expanded his search to local newspapers, hoping to find an article, a witness, anything that might give him a lead. He spent countless hours in the library, sifting through old archives, his eyes red and tired from reading. Every dead end only fueled his determination. The mystery of the woman became an obsession, driving him deeper into the search, even as those around him began to worry about his relentless pursuit. The streets where the accident had occurred became Jake's new hunting grounds. He talked to anyone who might have seen something, posting flyers and offering rewards for information. But days turned into weeks, and the woman remained elusive, a ghost in his memory. Yet, with every step, Jake felt a strange sense of purpose, as if he was destined to find her. This journey, he realized, was as much about discovering who he was as it was about finding her. Just as Jake was about to lose hope, an unexpected breakthrough came in the form of an elderly man who lived near the site of the accident. The man approached Jake one evening as he was putting up another flyer, his weathered face marked with curiosity. "I remember that day," the man said, his voice thick with age. Jake's heart raced as he listened intently. The man described seeing a woman running from the scene, her clothes singed, her expression one of fear and desperation. The man's words hung in the air, heavy with implications. "She looked like she was fleeing from something, or someone," he added, his tone somber. Jake's mind buzzed with possibilities. Was she running from the law? From her past? This was the first real lead he had found in years, and it reignited his determination. The man's description was vague, but it gave Jake a direction, a thread to pull at. Jake spent the following weeks scouring the area where the woman had disappeared, exploring every alleyway and backstreet, feeling the weight of the mystery grow with each passing day. The sense of something significant lurking just out of reach kept him going, even as exhaustion and frustration threatened to overwhelm him. He could sense that he was getting closer, but the closer he got, the more he realized that the truth might be more complicated than he had imagined. Jake's investigation eventually led him into the city's underbelly, where the truth about the woman began to emerge. She had a past stained with crime, a history that explained her need to stay hidden. She had once been involved in a criminal network, running small-time jobs that had gradually escalated into more dangerous territory. The realization hit Jake like a punch to the gut. The woman he had idolized as his savior was also a fugitive, someone who had been running from her own dark past. This revelation shook Jake to his core. He had always imagined her as a hero, pure and selfless, but now he had to reconcile that image with the reality of her past. The woman who had saved him was not just a hero, she was also a person burdened with mistakes, regrets, and a desperate need for redemption. The more Jake uncovered about her life, the more he realized how complex and intertwined their fates were. Despite the unsettling discoveries, Jake felt a strange sense of empathy for the woman. He understood that people were not defined solely by their mistakes, that there was more to her story than the criminal activities she had once been involved in. If anything, learning about her past made him even more determined to find her. He needed to hear her side of the story, to understand why she had chosen to save him and then disappear into the shadows. One cold evening, as Jake was preparing to call off his search for good, he saw her. She was huddled in a corner, her body frail, her spirit seemingly broken. The sight of her sent a shockwave through him. This was not how he had imagined their reunion. Jake approached her slowly, his heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and fear. What would he say? What would she say? The tension between them was palpable, as if the years of searching had built up to this single, fragile moment. When their eyes met, it was as though time stood still. The woman's gaze was filled with recognition, but also fear. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the weight of their shared history pressing down on them. Finally, Jake broke the silence, his voice trembling with emotion. "You saved my life," he said, his words hanging in the cold air. "I've been looking for you ever since." The woman's reaction was not what Jake expected. Instead of relief or happiness, there was only sorrow in her eyes. "Why did you come looking for me?" she asked, her voice hoarse and weary. Jake hesitated, struggling to find the right words. He had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in his head, but now, standing before her, all those rehearsals seemed inadequate. "I needed to thank you," he finally said. "And to understand why you left." The woman's face softened, but the sadness remained. "I didn't save you," she said quietly. "I was saving myself." Her words cut deep, but Jake knew there was more to the story. He pressed her for answers, and slowly, the truth began to unravel. She had been on the run that day, hiding from a life she could no longer bear. Pulling Jake from the car had been an impulsive act, a moment of clarity amidst the chaos of her existence. As she spoke, Jake felt a mix of emotions: gratitude, anger, confusion. She had saved him, yes, but at what cost to herself? And why had she vanished? The more she revealed, the more Jake realized that her story was not just one of crime and regret, but of a desperate search for redemption. She had seen in Jake a chance to do something right, something that could balance the scales of her life, even if only for a moment. Her story was heartbreaking. She had been a victim of her own choices, trapped in a cycle of crime and regret, trying to escape a life that had swallowed her whole. Saving Jake had been a turning point, but she had been too afraid to stay, too afraid of being caught and dragged back into the darkness. As she finished her story, Jake realized that the woman who had saved him was not a hero or a villain, but a person just like him, flawed, complicated, and struggling to find her way in the world. Jake's first instinct was to help her, to offer her a way out of the life she had chosen. "Let me help you," he pleaded, but she refused. "This is the life I deserve," she said, her voice steady despite the weariness in her eyes. Jake was stunned. How could someone who had done so much for him feel so unworthy of redemption? He offered her money, a place to stay, even a chance to start over, but she rejected it all. "Living on the streets is my penance," she explained, "my way of making up for the things I've done." Her words left Jake feeling helpless. He wanted so badly to repay her for what she had done, but he realized that her journey was one of self-imposed exile, a path she believed she had to walk alone. Jake tried to argue, to convince her that she deserved better, but she remained firm in her decision. Before they parted, Jake gave her his contact information, urging her to reach out if she ever changed her mind. "I'll always be here for you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. The woman thanked him, her eyes filled with a gratitude that words couldn't fully express. As she walked away, Jake watched her go, feeling a mixture of sorrow and admiration for the strength it took to continue living the way she did. Returning home after his encounter with the woman, Jake felt a heavy weight in his chest. He had found her, but the reunion had not been the joyful resolution he had imagined. Instead, it had left him with more questions and a deep sense of sadness. He couldn't stop thinking about her, about the life she had chosen and the pain she had endured. He knew that he couldn't just go back to his old life and forget about her. In the days that followed, Jake struggled to find a sense of peace. He realized that his life had been irrevocably changed by the encounter. He couldn't ignore the lessons he had learned or the new perspective he had gained. The woman had saved his life, but in a way, she had also given him a new purpose. He felt a strong desire to make something meaningful out of his own life, to give back in a way that honored her sacrifice. Inspired by her courage and resilience, Jake began to look for ways to help others. He started volunteering at local shelters, donating his time and resources to those who were struggling. It wasn't just about doing good, it was about finding a way to heal, to channel his gratitude into something positive. As he immersed himself in this new path, Jake found a sense of fulfillment that had been missing from his life for a long time. Jake's involvement in the community quickly grew. What started as simple volunteer work became a full-time commitment. He organized food drives, set up clothing donations, and even helped fundraise for local charities. His dedication didn't go unnoticed, and soon, he became a well-known figure in the community. People admired his selflessness, unaware of the personal journey that had led him there. But for Jake, it wasn't about recognition. Every act of kindness was a way of paying forward the gift he had received all those years ago. He often thought about the woman who had saved him, wondering where she was and how she was doing. He hoped that, wherever she was, she could somehow feel the impact of her actions. Jake knew that he couldn't change her life, but he could ensure that her sacrifice wasn't in vain. Through his work, Jake began to see the ripple effect of kindness. The people he helped were inspired to help others in turn, creating a chain of goodwill that spread throughout the community. It was a powerful reminder that even small actions could have a profound impact. As Jake continued his work, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that he was making a difference in the lives of others, just as the woman had made a difference in his. Years passed, and Jake's life continued to evolve. His commitment to helping others had become a core part of his identity. But the memory of the woman who had saved him never faded. He often wondered if she was still alive, still living on the streets. The thought troubled him, but he knew that she had made her choice. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that their story wasn't over yet. One day, while visiting a homeless shelter to drop off donations, Jake saw a familiar face in the crowd. It was the woman, but she looked even more frail and worn than the last time he had seen her. She was sitting alone, shivering in the cold, her body hunched over in exhaustion. Jake's heart ached as he approached her, his mind racing with a mixture of emotions. She looked up at him with tired eyes, and for a moment, it seemed like she didn't recognize him. But then, a spark of recognition lit up her face, and she smiled weakly. Jake sat down beside her, wrapping his coat around her shoulders to keep her warm. She was too sick to protest, too weak to refuse his help this time. Jake took her hand, feeling the chill of her skin, and told her that he was taking her to the hospital. She didn't argue, just nodded silently, as if she knew that this time, she couldn't do it alone. The hospital visit was bittersweet. The doctors did what they could, but it was clear that the woman's time was running out. She was too weak, too frail to recover from years of living on the streets. Jake stayed by her side, holding her hand, talking to her, and sharing memories of the life she had unknowingly given him. He told her about his work, about how she had inspired him to dedicate his life to helping others. The woman listened quietly, her breathing labored, but a peaceful smile never left her face. She told Jake that she was proud of him, that he had turned his life into something beautiful. In her final moments, she handed him a small, worn envelope. It contained a letter, written in shaky handwriting, expressing her gratitude and relief. She thanked him for finding her, for not giving up on her, and for giving her the peace she had sought for so long. Jake's heart broke as he read the letter, tears streaming down his face. He held her hand until she took her last breath, feeling the weight of her passing like a heavy stone in his chest. But even in his grief, there was a sense of closure, of knowing that she had found some semblance of peace in her final moments. The woman who had saved his life was gone, but her legacy would live on through him and the work they had inspired. After the woman's death, Jake felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that he couldn't let her story end with her passing. The world needed to know about her, about the sacrifices she had made and the life she had led. Jake decided to start a charity in her memory, one that would help people like her, those who had fallen through the cracks, those who needed a second chance. The charity, which he named the Second Chance Foundation, quickly gained support from the community. People were moved by the story of the woman who had saved Jake's life and inspired him to help others. The foundation provided shelter, food, and resources to the homeless, offering them a chance to rebuild their lives. It was exactly the kind of help the woman had refused for herself, but Jake knew it was what she would have wanted. As the foundation grew, so did Jake's determination to make a difference. He poured his heart and soul into the project, working tirelessly to ensure that no one else would have to suffer as the woman had. He knew that he couldn't save everyone, but if he could change even one life, it would be worth it. And with every person he helped, Jake felt like he was honoring the memory of the woman who had given him everything. The Second Chance Foundation flourished under Jake's leadership. It became a beacon of hope for those who had lost their way, providing not just the basics of survival, but also the tools needed to build a better future. The foundation offered job training, counseling, and educational programs, giving people the opportunity to break the cycle of homelessness and poverty. Jake worked closely with his team, ensuring that the foundation remained true to its mission. Jake's story and the foundation's success attracted attention from across the country. Donations poured in, allowing the foundation to expand its reach and open new centers in other cities. The impact was tangible, with countless lives transformed by the services they provided. But for Jake, it wasn't about the accolades or the praise. It was about keeping the woman's spirit alive, about continuing the work she had inspired. As the foundation grew, so did Jake's sense of fulfillment. He saw the difference they were making in people's lives, and it filled him with a deep sense of pride. But there was also a lingering sadness, a reminder that the woman who had started it all was no longer there to see the fruits of her sacrifice. Still, Jake knew that she was with him in spirit, guiding him as he continued the work they had unknowingly started together. Jake often reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. The accident that had nearly taken his life, the woman who had saved him, and the path he had chosen in her honor. It was a legacy that had been born out of tragedy, but one that had grown into something beautiful. Jake knew that the foundation was more than just a charity. It was a testament to the power of compassion, redemption, and the belief that everyone deserved a second chance. The foundation's success was a reminder that even the darkest moments could give rise to light. Jake had taken the pain and uncertainty of his past and turned it into something that could change lives. He had found his purpose in the most unlikely of places, and he was determined to keep that purpose alive for as long as he could. The legacy of the woman who had saved him lived on through every person the foundation helped. But it wasn't just about the past. Jake knew that the work they were doing was about the future, about giving people the opportunity to write new stories for themselves. He often thought about what the woman would say if she could see what they had accomplished. He hoped that she would be proud, that she would see that her life had mattered, even if it had been filled with hardship. Jake had made it his mission to ensure that her legacy would never be forgotten. The foundation's work created new connections and stories every day. People from all walks of life found themselves drawn to the Second Chance Foundation, each with their own reasons for wanting to help or be helped. Jake heard stories of hope, resilience, and recovery, each one reminding him of the impact they were making. These connections weren't just with the people they helped, but also with the volunteers and donors who supported the foundation. Jake found that his life was richer for these connections. He had built a community around the foundation, one that was united by a common goal, to make the world a better place. The foundation had become a place where people could find not only help, but also understanding and support. It was a place where they could rebuild their lives, just as Jake had rebuilt his after the accident. These connections were the lifeblood of the foundation, and Jake was grateful for every person who became a part of it. He knew that they were all linked by the story of the woman who had saved him, that her actions had set off a chain reaction that was still unfolding. Jake often wondered if she had any idea of the impact she had made, but he hoped that, wherever she was, she could feel the gratitude and love that her sacrifice had inspired. As the Second Chance Foundation continued to grow, so did the recognition of its impact. Jake was invited to speak at conferences, interviewed by journalists, and honored with awards. But while the attention was gratifying, Jake remained focused on the work itself. He used every opportunity to tell the story of the woman who had saved him, making sure that the world knew about her courage and the difference she had made. One particular interview stood out to Jake. It was with a national news outlet, and the interviewer asked him why he had chosen to dedicate his life to helping others. Jake took a deep breath and began to tell the story of the accident, the woman, and the journey that had followed. As he spoke, he felt a deep sense of responsibility to honor her memory, to make sure that her story was told in a way that did justice to her sacrifice. The interview aired nationwide, and the response was overwhelming. People from all over the country reached out to Jake, moved by the story and inspired by the work he was doing. Donations to the foundation increased, and offers of support came pouring in. Jake was grateful for the outpouring of kindness, but he knew that the true success of the foundation wasn't measured by awards or recognition, it was measured by the lives they were changing every day. Jake's journey also brought him back into contact with people from his past, friends and acquaintances who had drifted away over the years. They were amazed by the man he had become, by the way he had turned a tragic event into a powerful force for good. Many of them wanted to get involved with the foundation, offering their time, skills, and resources to help expand its reach. These reunions were bittersweet for Jake. He was happy to reconnect with old friends, but he couldn't help but think about how different his life might have been if the accident had never happened. He had once dreamed of a different future, one where he followed a more conventional path. But the reality of his life had turned out to be far more meaningful than anything he had imagined as a child. Jake welcomed these old friends into the fold, grateful for their support and eager to see how they could contribute to the foundation's mission. He knew that the connections he was making now were just as important as those from the past. They were all part of the same story, a story that was still being written, and Jake was determined to make sure that it had the best possible ending. As Jake looked back on the journey that had brought him to this point, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. The accident had been a turning point in his life, one that had set him on a path he never could have predicted. But despite the pain and uncertainty that had followed, Jake knew that he wouldn't change a thing. The experiences he had gone through, the people he had met, and the work he had done had shaped him into the person he was today. Jake had learned many lessons along the way. He had learned about resilience, about the power of compassion, and about the importance of helping others. But perhaps the most important lesson was that life was unpredictable, and that even in the darkest moments, there was always the potential for light. The woman who had saved him had taught him that, and it was a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. Jake knew that his journey was far from over. There were still challenges ahead, still people who needed help, and still work to be done. But he faced the future with confidence, knowing that he was living a life that honored the woman who had given him a second chance. He was determined to continue the work they had started together, to keep spreading the message of hope and compassion that had become his guiding light. Looking out at the horizon, Jake felt a sense of peace and purpose. The foundation he had built was thriving, but he knew that there was always more to be done. He began to make plans for the future, for new programs and initiatives that would expand the foundation's reach and impact. He wanted to ensure that the work they were doing would continue for generations to come, that the legacy of the woman who had saved him would never be forgotten. Jake envisioned a future where the Second Chance Foundation would become a national network of support for those in need, a place where anyone who was struggling could find help, hope, and a new beginning. He knew that it wouldn't be easy, but he was ready for the challenge. He had already come so far, and he was determined to go even further. As he stood there, contemplating the future, Jake felt a renewed sense of determination. The journey that had started with a single act of bravery had grown into something much larger than himself. And as long as there were people who needed help, Jake knew that he would be there, continuing the work that had given his life meaning. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Jake was looking forward to it with hope.